Yeah, a countdown.
Okay.
I'll do an intro.
Yep. Now.
Hey, Chris here, and welcome to Amplified Wellness Podcast. Today, my guest is a doctor with nearly 30 years experience in conventional medicine and integrative medicine. Welcome, Dr. Price.
Well, thank you. It's great to be on this podcast with you, Chris.
Oh, no, fantastic to have you on here. I know that when I started this podcast, it was December last year. You were the first person that popped in mind. We had a relationship. I was actually utilising your services for a while at your medical centre, and I was kind of blown away by some of your therapies and treatments there. And I knew that for Amplified Wellness, which is all about just chatting with experts like yourself and hopefully gathering tools that we can pass on to our listeners that can apply that directly to their lives to improve the quality of their health. It was absolutely awesome in the lead up to this, because I know that the subject matter that we're chatting about, which is the mind-body connection, is just so important for people today. And I can't wait to get your advice and opinion on all of these areas as well. In particular, how our emotions impact our physical health. So with your extensive background in medicine, just how much do our emotions impact on our physical health?
Well, I think it's just so foundational, because our emotions in Chinese medicine, our emotions are connected to each organs as well. So there's actually a direct connection there from the ancient Eastern traditions, like Chinese medicines and Ayurvedic. They all talk about how our emotions are connected to our organs and the meridians that run through our body. So in my experience, it's not only the emotions that affect our health, because if we have negative emotions, they can actually drain us. And you know that you can think of a time when you get angry or upset or stressed, we just feel very energetically drained.
Yeah. And
when we feel joy, we've got like boundless energy, right? It comes from somewhere. So definitely it has an impact, but people are not aware of how that's impactful for them. And they're not aware of how profound it is in terms of their day-to-day energy management. Because we have lots of times when we're fatigued, and more importantly, I get a lot of people who are very tired. They come and see me, like one of the biggest complaints I have is chronic fatigue, because I deal with people who have got mysterious illnesses, who have complex chronic conditions and diseases, and they don't really understand why they're not able to heal. And most of the times they think it's due to some sort of genetic predisposition or some physical problems, and they have, they're coming in with a list of symptoms that are like a mile long, and a list of diagnoses and tests, and want me to work out all their biochemistry and the pathology and look through all these things. And the simple fact is that when you're not feeling good or you're under stress, it stops you from healing, because you're running a sympathetic activation mode where your body thinks it's running away from tigers, the saber-toothed tiger. You're going to shut down. You can't heal. So it doesn't matter what happens, then your body's not in a healing mode, because we need to be in that parasympathetic rest, digest, and relax mode to actually heal. So this is the thing, we're in the 21st century, and everyone's got like negative stress running their lives in some way or another. That's created by our mind. And our mind creates a lot of our symptomatology that we're not aware of. So I call it making conscious what's unconscious, because if we're not aware of what's unconscious, we can't actually deal with the root cause. And most of the root causes that I see that people have in terms of their chronic health conditions are actually coming from emotions. So emotional root cause or psychological, spiritual root causes, as opposed to just pure physical root causes.
It's very interesting there what you mentioned about the unconscious mind, because I read recently that a lot of our conditioning from an early age, I think before 7 years of age, can drastically impact us. So if we do have some level of trauma at that age, it can just continue playing out in our unconscious mind and affecting our behaviours. How do people overcome something that they don't know is actually playing out subconsciously in their mind?
Yeah, so that's the challenge, because people have no, often they have no idea. They don't remember a lot of the things that happen before 7 years of age. And there's been, studies like the big studies, the ACEs study. I don't know if you've heard of that studies, the
No, I'm not
Adverse Childhood
familiar.
Events study. And that was a groundbreaking public study that was 10 years long. It was the CDC Kaiser Permanente study in the US that actually showed that adverse childhood events, particularly below the age of 18, that could be simple things like separation, witnessing an abuse, bullying at school. I mean, a lot of kind of things we think might not be that important, but they were trauma to that child. They actually have a huge predictive effect on the amount of chronic health burden or diseases that you actually get later in life. So the more adverse childhood events you've had, like particularly when you're young, the more likelihood you're going to get some heart disease, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune disease. Particularly autoimmune disease is high correlation with at least 2 or more ACEs, which is called the adverse childhood experience. You've had 2 or more, you're almost getting 100% risk of having an autoimmune condition.
Really? That's incredible.
And it impacts also your behaviors. And so what happens is people go to they have addictions and compulsion, and that's their solution to their problem. So if you're over drinking, or you're smoking cigarettes, or eating too much, or you're taking recreational drugs, it's because you have some underlying anxiety that you can't soothe. So you do these behaviors because that's the solution that they have. So you can't go and change people's behavior because it's not going to the source of their problem. You have to track their root trauma, which is driving the behavior, because they've got this trauma that's resonating and running in their body still. The body is like the unconscious mind. It reflects all of the unconscious programming that you've taken over a lifetime.
Yeah, and those traumas that you mentioned, how do they affect the physiology? Do they just put you into that fight or flight response, so that your body's just constantly breaking down and not repairing? And that's where these autoimmune conditions and other diseases come from?
Yeah, so that's probably the main mechanics, because if you have a trauma, and it might be the first one might be like 3 years of age, and that's the first time it was keyed in. What happens in that trauma, say your father said something to you that, made you very upset. Your brain just takes a snapshot of that trauma, and then anything that reminds you of that trauma, that's when it was first initially keyed in to your psyche, so to speak. And then some down the track, you will have something that reminds you of that initial trauma. It might be a sight, a sound, the way someone speaks, like your dad, will remind you of that trauma, and it triggers you a whole bunch of like as if it was happening again. So your body goes into this fight, flight, stress response. Cortisol goes high. You think you're going to have to be, you're going to be rejected or abused or whatever that happened at the same time. So it just runs the other way. So what happens, your brain shuts down, your cognitive function doesn't work very well, your limbic emotional brain starts taking the forefront, because it's trying to help keep you alive, so it's trying to save you. So it puts this whole fight-flight response on, and it makes you run the other way. So if you have that, if you have lots of triggers that you're not aware of, like I was treating the patient the other day who was, she didn't know why she was reacting to an overgrown lawn. Every time she saw this overgrown lawn, she would go into this like anger, and she would get really upset, and she would start blaming, why did her husband keep this lawn, overgrown? And it was, when I tracked it back, then I do kinesiology testing to track it right back to where it first came from. It tracked back to when she witnessed her father going into a rage about an overgrown lawn in his yard to her mother. So her brain goes, an overgrown lawn is not good. It's actually, it's traumatic, because she was traumatized at the same time. So just the sight of that was enough for a trigger. And she didn't calm down for days. So it's crazy. And in that time, her whole body went into a stress response. Now, she had high blood pressure. She was hot. She was angry. She was all upset, as if you were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger.
It's crazy.
That's going to make you sick.
And absolutely. Like the mind has such a huge capacity to visualize and and imagine the most amazing things. But I guess the wrong mentalization, the wrong visualization can cause like the complete reverse of that, and just like the worst scenario, the worst stress. And people are just playing these out daily in their head without even knowing a lot of the time. How can people overcome these things? I know that you do a lot of clearing with your clients. Is that the only way that you can move forward and get over these things?
No, sometimes what you want to do is have I give my patients, some of them, an event timeline. So they actually write down a list of when these events occur, and I just give them the whole timeline so that it can trigger them, that they might go, oh yeah, I forgot, because it triggers their subconscious to go, yeah, that's right, 2 years ago this happened, when I went, my sister did this. So it kind of triggers kind of possible trauma episodes that might occur in their life. And sometimes just awareness of that's creating or some of their symptoms can be enough to just heal them. Like awareness and having compassion for that little girl or that little boy who actually went through that can sometimes be enough to shift that. It's not always enough, because sometimes you have to go in. The best way is to go in and accept that whatever happened at that time, and that person did the best they could at the time, and they were not even aware of their own programming. So most people are, like people are bullies who are bullies are usually the ones who have been bullied previously.
Yes.
Another bully who's been bullied. So it's, it's one trauma leads to another, and often it's coming from unconscious programming all the way down the line. And when you don't have awareness, you can't wake up to yourself and actually be able to change that behavior, change the kind of trajectory that you're heading on. Which is just leading you to more unconscious programming. Sure. So we have a lot of authority structures that stop us from living our best life in physically, mentally, and emotionally and spiritually, because we have taken on so many people's programming from a young age, from society, from civilizations, TV, media, brothers, sisters, parents, siblings, teachers, especially the teacher archetype, told us how to be, what to do. And a lot of times it stops us from being who we need to be in our authentic expression. So my practice is all about seeing people who are out of alignment with where they need to be or where they need to go in terms of their soul expression. And as a result of that gap between where they are now and where they want to be, they get sick. They get expressed. The messages get expressed in the body as pain, as discomfort, as, diseases. Because the body is trying to tell them something, and it has to make it loud and clear so they can pay attention and take this body, this vehicle, to the right person who will actually help them turn that around or point that out, or they need to do some healing.
Right. Before we, you mentioned kinesiology, which I'm very interested in having a chat about in a minute. But before we move on, I just wanted to discuss negative emotions, in particular. Guys are notorious for not expressing their emotions. So whether it be anger or frustration or resentment or even love, suppressing that down and never really releasing it and acknowledging it, is that negative to our health as well, if we just keep pushing it down and never really addressing it?
Yeah, totally. If you keep pushing it down, you will get a condition like people get ulcers. They get a lot of family issues when you're suppressing your emotions will manifest in gut issues, digestive issues, right? Gut issues and digestive issues are often related to holding on patterns in the family. So people can't let go of this and not able to forget. So one big piece of healing is forgiveness and acceptance. So when you can accept something that's happened to you in the past, and you can truly forgive that perpetrator or whoever did this to you, you can let that go. That's very healing. That's like the ultimate healing. That's why forgiveness is so big in all healing kind of like traditions.
It's the biggest takeaway: don't hold grudges.
Yes. Be really willing to let go, because the first person you hurt is yourself.
Yeah.
When you eat you alive, people get cancer, because I see so many people who have cancer because they've got built up resentment and traumas from the past, and they're not expressing, so they're in holding patterns. Because you think about when you're stressed, what happens to you? You get tense, right? The muscles tense up. Like we're like, we're all tense. We feel like we got neck ache, you know, headache, our muscles feel really tense. We're really not very relaxed because we're thinking that someone's going to like be after us or we're in danger in some reason. And so as a result of that, our muscles tense up, but our fascia, which is the lining around our muscles and our organs, is kind of the scaffolding that holds everything up, right? Otherwise all your organs would drop down.
Yes.
So they tense up as well. And the meridian, the energy channels that actually are in the fascia, so they tense up as well. So then you've got now the meridians being blocked, so the energy is not flowing anymore. So these energy channels that feed the organs and systems and now don't have the life force coming in that way. So therefore people get sicker because their organs tense up. So if you imagine you've got a liver and then it becomes stress and it tenses up, how well do you think it's going to detoxify or make hormones or balance your blood sugar? It's not going to do it very well because everything is squeezed. So if you can turn a person back out of, reset their fight flight physiology stress pattern and turn them into the relaxation, you've got automatic healing now is available to you. But that is the challenge. People can't turn it off.
No, that is the challenge. It's the biggest killer today, isn't it? Stress. It's everywhere. It's emotional, physical. Yeah.
But
absolutely.
it's pinpointing the originating trauma that's key. Because if you don't get the originating trauma and that's not resolved, then all the traumas that look like it after that just continues to trigger you right, left, and center. And you have no idea why you see something, smell something, or look at someone who reminds you of something and you go off. And you're now in fight flight and you go, why did I do that? It might take you a while to calm down, but you didn't even have any control over that response. It's like someone pushed the button that said, do this. And now you just have this automatic pilot response in anger and you have no clue why. You don't have access to your cognitive function that goes and looks at the big picture and evaluates and go, hang on, that's a stupid thing to say. You just do this automatic reaction as if you were a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old. So it makes it hard for people to heal their triggers unless they can really track the originating trauma and really be able to resolve who started it or where it was first originating from. And then from then, anything that smells or tastes like that now is actually has a domino effect for healing.
It's fascinating. One of the techniques that you use in your clinic is kinesiology and muscle testing. This is really fascinating. It blew me away. I was first introduced to muscle testing probably about 5 years ago through Paul Chek, who's a fitness expert. And I was fairly skeptical at the time. He was very much muscle testing his hand about whether he should take certain supplements or certain food. But it wasn't until I've actually had first-hand experience at muscle testing with a number of practitioners and you being one of them. And it was astounding at how accurate you were with some of the questions that you were asking. For the listeners who aren't familiar with muscle testing and kinesiology, how does it work and what is it?
I would say that it's really a neurological test. So you're really not testing a muscle, you're testing the circuit of the brain to that set of muscles. So you're testing the nervous system integrity in relation to a question you might be asking or something that you're holding in your mind. Because if your brain thinks of something, it's either going to code that with stress or it's going to code it with relaxation, correct? So if you think, like, if you say, like, I love my favorite food, you think of your favorite food and you go, yeah, that sounds good. I can't wait to eat my favorite food. And you can do a test and the neurological circuit to that will be strong because there's no neurological stress with that thinking about your favorite food. But if you say, I eat dirt, that is automatic. Your brain goes, I don't want to eat dirt. That's going to taste foul. So then that is going to cause there's going to be a lot of noise inside that circuit to the muscles, and that's what's going to create the weakening effect of the muscles. So it's not really testing a muscle, it's testing a neurological signal. It's probably more accurate to say. And the reason I say that is because with that concept, it's what we're looking at is what causes the brain stress. Right? And then from there you can ask a whole heap of questions. Then basically, anything you go, especially, it's a really good way to question the subconscious mind. Now, the subconscious mind probably controls 95% of our behaviors, beliefs, and our our life, really. And it's only 5% that we have conscious willpower, or in terms of what we do. But we can't access the subconscious mind. It's like you hit a recorder, it has recorded everything from conception until now. So it has this huge, perfect photographic memory that has remembered everything. And you don't consciously remember more than 7 bits of information. So you can't necessarily access a lot of the data. But like, it's like hypnosis. If you put yourself under hypnosis, like the police do when they try and like interrogate someone, they find all sorts of details. So you can access that through kinesiology testing, which is just a way of asking questions and to see if the brain is stressed about that, or is it coherent? Is the signal coherent, or is it stress? If it's stress, that means there's, the brain is stressed, which means the body will be stressed.
Yeah.
And so that tells you a lot about. So if you're talking about a trauma, you can say, I recall this trauma. It's all you're doing is taking that memory out of the subconscious data bank and looking at on a TV screen and saying, is that a stress, or am I resolved about that, or am I still, traumatized about it? Because if your arm goes down, that means that there's still a trauma to the brain about it's still holding stress. So this is how you can test what actually is causing stress to that person neurologically.
It's really awesome. And can everybody learn that technique and that skill, or is it only for practitioners?
Oh no, everyone can learn it. You just have to have commitment to learn it. I think you can learn. If one person can do something, you can also do it as well.
Absolutely.
It takes some training, and of course, to do it well and to do it with trust. The biggest blocks is actually trusting yourself and trusting your own guidance. So there's sometimes blocks that you might have to actually trusting your own, testing. So I sometimes recommend people use a number of other tools before they even do muscle testing or kinesiology testing or neurological testing. They might use things like a pendulum to test, because it's sometimes easier for people to test with a pendulum, because they're not having to do, especially when you do self-testing, it's a lot more difficult than testing someone else, because you're more objective when you're testing someone else. So the challenge with using kinesiology testing is you have to be fairly neutral. You have to not be too biased, because if you go, I really want this to be true, and you test, well, you could fool yourself very easily. So that's why it's easier when you're testing someone else, because you're much more objective. All right. So harder to test yourself until you gain kind of competency and inner trust.
If you trained and became very competent with it, could you test like other members of your family on certain things, like is this food the best food choice for, say, a son or a daughter or a wife, or supplements?
Totally.
Yeah. Wow.
So the key is not. That's not a great question, because you have to it's always about degrees, right? What's good and what's bad, like compared to what. So you would say, well, how much beneficial is this food for this person from 0 to 100%? And you would calibrate, is it 50% benefit, 60, 70, 80, 90? And there might be a rule that, like for supplements, I might say, if it's not more than 75% beneficial, I don't bother taking it. So then I know that that's my criteria. So you need to establish criteria. So the questions you ask is actually one of the most important skill sets, not so much the learning how to do the mechanics of it. It's like learning and know what to ask and how to ask, and the questions you need to ask to get the answers that you're seeking to find the truth of a situation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's definitely very, very fascinating.
It's fascinating, and it's so much more illuminating as a practitioner, because you can go beyond the limitations of conventional testing or even functional testing and so many other diagnostic tools that have got its limits. But with asking the subconscious mind of that person, or the body of the person, or their soul, you can say, well, I'm going to ask your soul, I'm going to ask your higher self, or I'm going to ask your body what is going on here. And you can just come up with a whole heap of questions and you'll get answers. Right, the body will respond to you, or their brain will respond to you, depending on what you're asking.
To finish up, I just wanted to ask, have you had experiences with clients that just had health conditions, diseases that just wouldn't respond to conventional treatments and physical treatments, and it wasn't until you cleared certain traumas that the symptoms eased and went away? Is that
that's basically
common?
It's very common, especially someone who has chronic health, complex health problems that they've had for years. Usually they tried everything. They've tried all sorts of diet, nutrition, exercises, lots of kind of different alternative treatments, and they're still getting the symptoms. And then, because they're the kind of patients I get, the mysterious illnesses that come to me, right? And so I asked the body, I asked their brain, is this symptom the root cause? Is it physical, mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual? And it will often come out either emotional, right? The root of the root. So say you had a virus, right? You might go, oh, I'm picking up virus. But then you go, well, what's causing my virus? Or what's causing my bacterial infection to become so recurrent? Right. It's usually coming back to an emotional landscape of not enough self-love. So I don't love myself, or I don't, so that I can't put enough healthy boundaries. So I just say yes all the time, and I can't say no, and I don't know, I don't deserve, and I'm not receiving. All of this causes stress in the body, which predispose that person to getting opportunistic infection, which then creates their diseases.
Yes, yeah.
So when you track back down to if I see that it's emotional, I'm already tracking trauma. Okay, is there the original? I'll ask, what's the originating trauma? And I'll track a timeline. So that's the good thing about using this testing methodology. You can track the timeline of an occurrence, of an event, of a situation that's initiating that issue. You resolve that, you heal, you love, you forgive, you let go. And now that person is no longer running stress in their body with anything that reminds you of that. And they can just start healing. And I see it time after time, people have like allergies and like terrible allergies. Allergies is a classic. People think that's like, a lot of allergies are just fear coding.
Really?
Yeah, you have an allergy, and most of the allergies I see is not from a physical reaction to a chemical. It's an emotional stress that they've coded that as dangerous from a trauma they've had. Like I just cleared my last patient, cleared an allergy that she had when her mother was shouting at her while she was eating a piece of fruit, right? And from then on, at 2 years of age, she's coded this fruit with like as an allergic reaction. When I tested energetically for her, it didn't come as a physical allergy, it came an emotional. And then when I cleared that, I forgive my mother for yelling at me why I ate this piece of fruit at 2 years of age, right? She can now eat that fruit, no problems. Allergy gone. So a lot of times when you have one allergy, it spreads, the fear tends to spread, just spreads more and more to, then you're now allergic to like lots and lots of things.
Yeah, it's incredible. So many people will be having similar symptoms and diseases and medicating their whole life when potentially they should be looking back to those early traumas and events that could have caused. So if anybody's listening in that boat, make sure that you go see a practitioner like Dr. Price that could definitely help. Dr. Price, thank you so much for being on Amplified Wellness Podcast. You operate Beyond Good Health in Robina and I believe Ashgrove
in Brisbane.
Ashgrove.
I don't go there, but my other practitioners go there. Yes.
Fantastic. So if people want to find out more about your services, Beyond Good Health, is there any other contacts where they can find? Is that the best place?
Just go to beyondgoodhealth.com and they'll be able to find it pretty easily.
Yeah, no, fabulous.
If we go beyond health, we definitely take people beyond good health.
Absolutely, beyond good health. we don't want good health. We want beyond that. We want amazing health.
Exactly, extraordinary health. Absolutely.
Extraordinary health. It was lovely chatting with you, Dr. Price. Yes. And keep up the amazing work that you're doing at that clinic. And I'd love to chat with you further down the line because I know that you have so many therapies and modalities that you specialize in, and we've only just touched on one, which is mind-body connection, which is huge. But hopefully, our listeners can take some really vital points out of that and understand that our emotions do have a massive impact on our physical body and health.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Chris. That was a pleasure to add some value to your listeners.
Thank you so much. Have a fantastic day.
Okay, great.
Bye.
Bye.
Awesome. Thank you so much.